everybody, I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from the Winnipeg Free Press. Together we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Kenny and Renny post-game show after a game that started out looking like it was going to affirm everything that we'd been thinking of this Winnipeg Jets team up to this point. You know, this dogged team, dogged pressure team. Yeah, they lost their first game, but they looked like the better of those two teams when they played Calgary. They definitely looked like the better team for the most part of that game against the Florida Panthers before almost giving it up late. And then first period of this game, I'll tell you, I saw one of the best pressure teams in the NHL. That is the LA Kings, a team that really, really knows how to hold teams' feet to the fire. And that's their style of play. That's how they succeed. And if you were a casual observer, you know, a hockey player who came in and didn't know this league, and you said, which of these two teams is the high pressure team that, you know, kind of is fearsome throughout the league, I think the majority of people would have looked at it and said, well, it's that team right there, the home team, that Winnipeg Jets team. They were all over them and looked like, okay, we're now starting to see that when you talk about the heavyweights, and I don't know, I think someone, I forget the conversation we were having, but someone was questioning, maybe it was one of the media members was questioning the legitimacy of this LA Kings team. I don't. I think this is a team that's, you know, probably going to be a tough out in the playoffs this year, as they are every year, as they were for the Edmonton Oilers the last couple of years. But I take a look and I think that is one of the best pressure teams in the NHL, but you wouldn't have thought that based on what the Winnipeg Jets were doing to them. And so that's the blueprint. And the Jets once again get to that blueprint that they've been trying to get to, that they showed for stretches of last year, really showed at the beginning of this year. And if you're a believer, well, there was a lot of reason for belief. And then the second period comes, and there's a whole bunch of things, and we can dive into these things. I mean, the loss of Gabe Vilardi, we're not going to have any updates on this unless Ken found something out by surprise. I didn't. He's going to be reassessed in the morning, and we're going to learn more about him tomorrow. But losing Gabe Vilardi, did that take the wind out of the Winnipeg Jets sails? You know, we talked about this team having depth, you know, up and down the lineup, and then all of a sudden you move that guy, and that kind of challenges the depth, right? Because you kind of have to do the shuffle. Who's going to move in and go on that line? I think we know that the likes of Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele are going to demand a significant winger on that line. So who goes up? Maybe a guy like Alex Iafallo tries to find a way to get in there, or maybe it's Nino Niederreiter, maybe it's Nick Ehlers, who knows? But then the shuffle happens after that. Right now, how does the line that loses that player cope, and so on and so forth? The dominoes start falling. So I mean, maybe we saw that tonight. Rick Bowness wasn't buying it. He said it's about finding solutions, finding answers. They didn't do that tonight. But I mean, you have to realize, you take a player like that out of the lineup, it can have an effect. Maybe it's that. It creates other questions for me, though. One of the questions I've thought about this high pressure system of the Winnipeg Jets is it a system that tires a team out, right? So if you take a look at their last game against the Panthers, where they were fairly dominant over the Panthers for the first little bit, and then they almost end up having the Panthers sneak their way back into that game. Do they get exhausted playing this style? Are they not able to night after night after night continue to play that style for a full 60 minutes? That's a question. And then, I mean, maybe the other question is this team, you know, do they kind of fall apart under pressure when things are going good for the Winnipeg Jets? And I think we saw that last year, and I think we've seen that for a number of seasons. 2019 comes to mind. Last season most definitely comes to mind. When things are going good for the Winnipeg Jets, they are a wagon that is loaded with bricks and heading downhill at a high pace. You just can't stop them. But when they do finally get stopped, the wheels seem to fall off a little bit. And this is almost, I think, like this game tonight is a little bit of a microcosm of what we saw last season. Start out hot, look dominant. Then when things kind of they fall, they can't get up. And I think we saw a little bit of that in that game. It's I take a look at a loss like that. Yes, it's one loss. Could be no big deal. But I think losses like that are a little bit disheartening. Like by the end of that, they were getting kind of thrown around by the LA Kings. They didn't look like they were in the LA Kings league by the end of that game. And I think it's just really hard to start a game with so much belief, the way that they'd created belief by the way they were playing in the first place, and to end it like that, especially in a game where you're trying to get up and make sure that you stay up. because it's the revenge game for Pierre-Luc Dubois. The fans would have loved to have seen their team stick it to Pierre-Luc Dubois. That didn't happen. Happened in the reverse. But I just take a look at that game, and I think it leaves you with a lot of questions, right? First couple games, we've seen what the Winnipeg Jets are capable of. This game, I think, also shows us what the Winnipeg Jets are capable of. And if you were looking for patterns in the first number of games, and the pattern that you were seeing was a Winnipeg Jets team that is able to apply pressure and able to get after teams. I think you also have to be open to looking at the pattern that the Jets blew the Calgary game late with some mistakes. They almost got caught by the Florida Panthers, and now tonight, as the game wore on, they got worse, and the LA Kings got a lot better. So closing out games, Winnipeg Jets have shown in all 3 outings this year that has been a challenge for them. So can we expect that to be a challenge going forward? I don't know. It's a good question. You know who we should ask that question? Maybe we should ask it of the man with the best music in the business, because, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to bring in Kenny. Here he comes. Kenny, like me, you ran home after the game. It felt like the Jets left the arena a little early for home as well in that game. But I got to say, that I appreciate you staying in the threads that Frankie and the boys provided you. I was half expecting to see you maybe in your robe, maybe in pajamas. I'm wondering if you've got like polar bear foot slippers on right now. That's what I'm imagining is happening. But it doesn't matter what's going on under the table, what's going on the top of it. You look like $1 million. And of course you do, because you've been dressed up by Frankie and the boys over at Vittorio Rossi. Hey, you want to look like Kenny and Renny? Here's what you do. You head on down to Gordon Avenue. You go to Vittorio Rossi. You walk in. You loudly proclaim, Kenny and Renny sent me. I need to see Frank or one of the boys. And Frankie and the boys will make sure that you're taken care of right. Absolutely great to have them on board. Ken, how are you doing tonight? And what did you make of what happened out there on the ice? The buffet is open.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, it was certainly a interesting first period for the Winnipeg Jets, but I would correlate. That it went south in a hurry, and the Jets just could not find it, and they played right into the Kings style. That was an absolute clinic, Sean, in terms of the 1-3-1's effectiveness, and if a team is not patient against it, it can go south in a hurry. Oh, Maul, nice to see you back. No, that's not where we're going today. That was just it was just a poor effort. The Jets got disheartened, and then they got frustrated, and then they snuck away from what they do best. And when you don't do what you do best, then you have issues, which is what the Jets had tonight. And yeah, I mean, it was just not a good effort overall. I'm not saying the Jets weren't trying, but I would say that, Sean, the Kings imposed their will in the second and third period, and the Jets did not have much of a response. And I would say that it's not a good sign when the Vegas Golden Knights are rolling into town, because if the Jets think that their next opponent is going to take it easy on them because they have suffered an injury and kind of got away from their game, I've seen a lot of strong play from the Vegas Golden Knights, and they don't like losing to anyone. So I would say that the Jets better park this one quickly and try to get back to what they did in the first period, because when they play that hockey game, they can make life difficult on the opponent. When they don't, that what happened tonight is what happens. So no doubt. And sorry, I know you asked if I had an update. There was no real update. There was an email that came out from another source to someone else at the paper that there's concern about the MCL, but I mean, we're not doctors on TV. We'll wait until see what the MRI brings. But Sean, I would say that, you know, we aren't doctors, but the way that your leg is not supposed to bend that way. So
No.
I would just say that it probably does, for a guy who's gone through some really tough injuries. That doesn't look like it's going to be a short-term thing, but if it's MCL and not ACL, that's good news for the Jets. But again, we'll wait and see what the reports are moving forward here. But I would say that the Jets are Mark Scheifele, and let's just put it this way: I'm expecting Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele to need a new line mate for the foreseeable future, and that starts on Thursday against Vegas. And I liked a lot of what Vladislav Nemestikov brought to that line. I understand, Nikolaj Ehlers was up there for a few shifts. I would say there would be some value into going that route. I would normally say Nino Niederreiter, Sean, makes sense to me in that role, but I honestly think that Nino Niederreiter needs to play with Cole Peretti right now to give him a little bit of that physical nature on that line. So I'm not 100% sure which direction the Jets are going to go, but I would think Nemestikov will get the first crack at it. I like his ability to play a stiff game, get involved in the forecheck, but he also still has a very skilled element of his game. He's got a really good hockey mind. And Dom, I mean, well, who do you want there, Dom? Sorry, Dom Zappia says if Nino Niederreiter is on the top line, Nemestikov's on the top line, the Jets are in trouble. Why? The Jets need someone to dig the puck out. I mean, it's not always the most skilled three players play on the top line. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but this is a guy who's a skilled player. He's a first-round draft pick for a reason. Does a team have better depth when he plays lower in the lineup? Yes, but when a top-line player exits the lineup, I mean, you got to make a couple of moves. So I like him in that role. I think Nikolaj Ehlers needs to get going. I think that Nikolaj is trying hard for sure. But Nikolaj looks like a guy who missed all of the preseason, Sean. Don't you agree? I mean, he's just played his first 3 preseason games, and now he's catching up to game speed. So now it's about him finding his game and getting to that next level, which we know is there. He's been a skilled player for a long time. So in the short term, the Jets need to be better. They weren't, Sean, all the things we talked about in terms of structure, that structure was out the window basically for the second and third period, I thought. Don't you? I mean, all of the signs that we saw from the Jets playing, well defensively, that's been gone. So, I mean, I just think that they sort of just slipped off the tracks today is what I felt like.
Oh, I couldn't disagree more. Hey, I will say this, Ken, you don't have to play doctor on TV. You just have to play one on the podcast every once in a while. So that's, you should get your mindset in
Are you telling me I'm off forward. TV?
I didn't think I would.
Do you know something
so
that I don't
easily,
know?
But yeah, there we go. The Sportsnet cuts come through. No, I'm kidding. I wanted to touch on something that you'd said here before we move on to that. I think you make a good point in the idea of the Golden Knights coming into town. They're just playing red hot, picking up right where they left off. That's going to be a tough game for the Winnipeg Jets. And then they play the Edmonton Oilers after that, who didn't start the season so well, but looked like they woke up tonight and kind of shell-shocked the Nashville Predators. Like, you put yourself in a situation where you lose to those two teams, and now all of a sudden the most important play of the season for the Winnipeg Jets is that post that Matthew Tkachuk hit, because if he'd put that in the net and they'd tie that up and the Jets lost that game, you're looking at potentially starting the season something like 0-4-1 or something like that. Those are the kind of holes that are hard to dig your way out of. So, like, the next couple of games here, the Jets, to your point, I mean, you're going to have to figure it out right quick what you're going to do to replace Gabe Vilardi. And find a way to make sure that the other lines aren't overly affected. Because listen, the next 2 games are really tough games. If they lose their next 2 games, all of a sudden they're 1 win and 4 losses on the season. That's tough. That's a tough hole to dig yourself out of. We don't want to speculate, and we've talked about this stuff last week. Hey, I think of a guy like North End Rick, who last season thought that they were going to start 2-8, and they went out and stole that victory right off the bat, first thing in the season against the Colorado Avalanche, and kept building from there. As of right now, I think North End Rick had said that he still thinks the same thing. They're going to go 2-8. I see their schedule coming up here. They've got the Canadiens coming up. They've got the Red Wings. They've got the Blues. You know, the Blues have actually surprised me to start the season. But, I mean, as of right now, it's still open there. But, hey, my guy North End Rick, he's been wrong in the past when it comes to hockey takes. Where he's rarely wrong, though, Ken, is when he's bringing you the quote from the folks over at Pristine Roofing. As I've said in the past, Rick is the guy that you want to give a call if you want to get Pristine Roofing down to have a look at your place. They've jumped on board the podcast this season, and we're so happy they have a quality organization that focus on quality first. And, you know, I mean, they're not trying to sneak in the back door. They're not trying to give you like some kind of stupid deal, and then you realize you get what you paid for. In the case of Pristine Roofing, you get far more than you pay for, because what you get is a job that's done absolutely perfect. You want to get them down at your place. Well, North End Rick's the guy to call. Like I said, I encourage you to take him to task for his takes on this podcast. Ken, I went combing through the show earlier on today, looking for all the Lamplighters and all the Keg saves of the game. I got to say, I find it hilarious because there's a lot of stuff that I missed as the show is going. A lot of North End Rick taking the piss. And so, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to do it. Call him down to your house, point out that spot in the roof that's giving you a problem, and then berate him on his hockey takes, please. For me, for Ken, for the sanity of all Jets fans, get North End Rick down and make sure you take him to task, or simply call Pristine Roofing 1-204-237-7663. Ken, the idea of going with I wanted to expand a little bit more on Nick Ehlers, just because I want to know where you think his game is at. Because I'm taking a look at this, and yeah, I know things started slow, but everything kind of started slow for the Winnipeg Jets. There were problems. There was a lot of people who missed because of sickness. And yes, I know Nick Ehlers was, injured, so he wasn't able to, take part as much as other people were. But I'll be honest, I would have thought by game 3 now we would have seen more signs of what we know Nick Ehlers is capable of. It's a slow start for him. There's a reason it's a slow start, but I'm starting to wonder if the start is a little slower than it should be.
Well, I mean, 1 shot on goal, 6 attempts tonight. I mean, I think the one thing with Ehlers is he's had, fairly a decent volume on shot attempts in the first 3 games, especially when you consider his ice time was, in that 12-minute range in game 2. Today he's over 16 minutes, which I liked. I'm glad they went and you gave him a little bit more ice time, a little bit more pop. Needs to get his legs. He has had stretches where he's been skating well. I haven't seen a lot of chemistry with that line so far, with Cole Peretti and Nino Niederreiter. Does that mean, and there again, so could you consider trying Ehlers up on that top line? Of course. I mean, I got no problem with that. I mean, that's how Rick Bowness started last year. I wouldn't have been shocked if he had considered starting it this year before putting Gabriel Vilardi there. I'm also okay with that. I just think that, and the other thing too, Nemesnikov plays well with Niederreiter, so maybe those 2 guys get going on that second line with Peretti. I think on the whole, I think that line needs to be better. So whether it's changing the personnel or giving Nikolaj Ehlers a couple other guys to play with, I'm okay with whichever direction. No, I don't think Nikolaj Ehlers he hasn't found his groove, because when he is in the groove, he flies. He makes things happen. He's disruptive to the defense. He pushes the defense back. He sets up guys for one-timers because of his ability to need the defense to respect his speed. He's a great passer. He can shoot the biscuit. So right now, he hasn't been going. I mean, he knows it. You know it. I know it. Rick Bowness knows it. But, if people think that the Jets are just going to sit down Nikolaj Ehlers, come on. He missed all of camp. For the Jets to be a good team, they need Nikolaj Ehlers going. He's involved in the play, but he needs to get going and drive play. That's what Nikolaj Ehlers does when he's going well. So He's going to have to be better. I mean, I don't think that there's any dispute on that. And again, I'm not pinning this on the goalie at all, Sean, but Connor Hellebuyck needs to be better. He's given up 4, 4, and 5 in the 3 games. I mean, it's got nothing to do with his contract. And yes, the Jets have let him down at times. And yeah, Rick Bowness is right. The Jets needed to give him a bit more run support. But Connor Hellebuyck is an elite goalie, and right now he's not playing like an elite goalie. Like I said, Connor Hellebuyck is not the reason the Jets are 1-2, but he hasn't played well to this point. I thought he was very much under control in game 2. It was a 5-2 game. They got 2 extra attacker goals. That means nothing. But today, I didn't like the Trevor Moore goal, the first one that trickled through him, and I didn't like the wrist shot from the top of the circle. I wasn't sure on the replay if it might have hit the defenseman's stick, but it's still a wrist shot from the top of the circle. Those can't go in a tight game. I know it wasn't a tight game, but I expect Connor Hellebuyck to be great. Connor Hellebuyck is an elite goaltender that you can count on. But right now, I think the best thing for Connor Hellebuyck, and I think the Jets were already planning to play Laurent Brossoit against Vegas on Thursday anyway, but the best thing for Connor Hellebuyck is a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday session with Wade Flaherty and get ready to face Connor and Leon on Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada and give him the start on Saturday night after he's reset and had an opportunity to iron out a few of the little details that he always loves about his game. Right now, he hasn't looked comfortable, Sean. I mean, we're not goalie experts, but one thing I know is that when Connor Hellebuyck is big and boring and economical, he looks different than how he's looked in the first 3 games. That's not Panic at the Disco territory. Hellebuyck's going to have a bad year, but he needs to be better. I mean, that it's simple. He needs to be better for the Jets to be a good team.
I find it interesting because when you had the big signings of Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, if I had said to you, okay, the bets are open, which of these 2 players is going to come out of this signing like they were shot out of the cannon, I think the odds would have been like 80% it was going to be Connor Hellebuyck ahead of Mark Scheifele. And it really has been an opposite situation. Like, this is not the start I think Connor Hellebuyck would have hoped for. I think it's not the start the majority of Jets fans would have expected from Connor Hellebuyck. I'm going to take it a little further than you. I'm not saying that the Jets lost these games because of Connor Hellebuyck, but let's put it like this. I think Connor Hellebuyck was most definitely outdueled by Cam Talbot tonight. He was clearly outdueled in the Calgary game. He wasn't outdueled in the Florida game, and yet somehow that team almost got their way back into the end of it. We always talk about the timely saves that, you need a goaltender to make in those situations. And let's be honest, in that Florida game, that timely save, it only came from the post. I mean, other than the post, that timely save did not exist. And it definitely didn't exist on this night tonight, where, really this is one of those nights where Connor Hellebuyck did not make the next save. And that floater, that shot that Trevor Moore takes that beats him to the top corner, really is just a scenario about, and never mind I think it's the 2-0 goal. That Dano sets up Moore, the first goal there. I mean, that goes right through him. Connor Hellebuyck has said in the past, like, goals that go through you are bad goals, period. So that's a bad one on him. Like, this is a night where Connor Hellebuyck made it. If the Jets didn't lose, and it's hard to lose a game, I've always said this before, you don't win a lot of games 0-0, and the Jets basically get a garbage time goal at the end of the game there. So by no means can you say that, but what you can probably say in this game is Connor Hellebuyck really didn't give the Jets much of a chance to be positioned to come back in this game. So I mean, listen, I asked Rick Bowness about it, and you want to drain the emotion, you want to drain the opinion out of a question. So the question that I asked him was simply, what have you made of the play of Connor Hellebuyck in his first 3 games? He'd said something similar to what you're saying. He didn't believe that he'd cost him any games or anything like that. But I think that I think it's pretty evident. I think anyone looking at this knows that Connor Hellebuyck is not playing the kind of game we've come to expect from Connor Hellebuyck, although someone challenged me on Twitter, and I think that there's a challenge to be had here. Down the stretch last season when the Jets were faltering, I thought that Connor Hellebuyck wasn't really there for his team at that time either. So if you want to say that this stretches back through the playoffs into a good chunk of the latter half of the season last year, maybe we can say that. But the fact of the matter is, no one is mistaking what we've seen from Connor Hellebuyck as the Vezina caliber version of Connor Hellebuyck that most of us have come to expect.
No, it's not close. I mean, goalies would argue that the post that Tkachuk hit was because that's all that he had, Sean, right? I mean, that would be the goalie counter to that. It was, he took away the angle, all he had was the post. So, but no, I mean, we're expecting Connor Hellebuyck to be an elite goalie. Right now, he has not been anywhere close to being elite, and that needs to change for the Jets to be a playoff team. The Jets need Hellebuyck playing at his very best, and right now, he looks like a guy who's finding his game. Now, we don't know why. It's natural for someone to try harder once they get a big deal. Connor's, not wired the way everybody else is, but right now, he's not stopping pucks at a rate he's used to stopping them at. His save percentage is in the 840s, and his goals against is over 4. I mean, that's not going to work for the Winnipeg Jets, nor is it, again, small sample size, people, is what I would say. Yeah, some people are arguing go back to March. I'm all for Laurent Brossoit getting the net on Thursday, and hey, if he plays great, sure, consider going with him again. But the Jets are committed to Connor Hellebuyck, but there's no goalie controversy here. Connor's the starter. It's Laurent Brossoit's job to push him, and that's what he's here to do. And he's here to play as well as he can and earn as many starts as he can. So I expect he will be in the net on Thursday, and then we'll see what happens after that. But yeah, I mean, it's the Jets Connor has lots of company. Lots of guys need to be better, but the Vezina caliber goalie needs to be better. I mean, we're not sugarcoating this today, but I'm also not blaming him either because the Jets haven't been at their best. But the other thing I would say too, it's easy to make the argument the Jets could be 0-3 or 1-5. I mean, the Jets also could be 2-1. So right now they're not. The way they've played today is not sustainable. If the Jets play like they did today with regularity, they're not going to be a playoff team. If they play the way they did against Calgary and for the majority of the game against Florida, they'll be competitive. Good question by Mark Auld. Did LA make adjustments after the first? Well, I don't know that it was necessarily adjustments they made. They stuck to their structure and then played a better game. I mean, they forced the Jets into unforced errors, and the Jets could not respond. I mean, they played with speed in the first. I didn't see the Jets play with any speed in the second or third period. I mean, no excuses, mantra or not. I think there was an emotional letdown, whether Rick Bowness wants to, admit it on the podium or not, Sean. And it was a great question. I do think the Jets had an emotional letdown. And if you heard the way that both Cole Peretti and Nikolaj Ehlers spoke about it after, I mean, of course, Nikolaj Ehlers said it himself as someone who's gone through that type of thing before. It sucks. And even though you want to say next man up and everything else, of course you're concerned for your fallen teammate. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any dispute, but that's not an excuse. You can't not play well because one player gets hurt. Injuries are part of the game, as unfortunate as they are. The Jets were not dangerous offensively. They didn't make life particularly tough for Cam Talbot. And Sean, quite frankly, Cam Talbot looked like the way Cam Talbot did in the bubble playoff year when he knocked the Jets out of the playoffs. It wasn't nearly difficult enough on him, and he made the saves that he needed to make. And the other one he had no chance on. I mean, anyways, let's get to the
here. Yeah, for sure. I wanted to touch on this for Mark Auld. So Mark, I went in. I specifically asked Pierre-Luc Dubois afterwards if there was a switch in how they were playing if they drew something up after the first period. And the answer to it was no. But I think this is a good bridge into the next thing that I want to talk about here, about how Pierre-Luc Dubois thought this team kind of turned the tide in that game. Before we get to that, I just want to give a shout out to another one of our sponsors, Cambrian Credit Union. Listen, I'm going to say this. If you are interested in getting a home, you need a mortgage or something like that, if you want the kind of house that the walls are sturdy enough that they'll hold up TCB bottle caps or things like this, because my house is sturdy enough. The walls do stand up. And the reason I was able to get a house that the walls are still standing after all these years is because I went to the folks at Cambrian Credit Union, as Ken did. We are both customers there. And one of the things that just makes us so happy, other than the fact that we've dealt with them and it's so easy, and for me specifically, my family and my kids going there, just all the involvement that they've had in the community. It's something that we like to be involved with good people and good organizations. It's one of the things we look at when we are joining and partnering with sponsors. And Cambrian Credit Union, you just take a look at the list like this. Highly, highly involved in the community. I live in North Kildonan, and their thumbprints are all over North Kildonan from their generosity and the things they do to get involved. So happy to have them on board. They've been a great sponsor. And I just want to give a shout out to the Kenny and Renny OGs before we move on. The Johnston Group, you guys all know about them. Why? Well, because they've been here since the beginning. And if you want to run a smaller, or if you do run a small business in Canada, look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. Okay, I want to jump into this Mark Auld question, and just the idea here of how they got back into this game. Pierre-Luc Dubois had said to me, and the way he remarked on it, I stuck around and I wanted to talk to him a little bit longer about it. But he'd said basically, if you don't know the history of what's happened with LA so far this year, Carolina went rolling into town. I think took a 5-1 lead on them, and they scored their way back into that game, sent it to overtime, lost it in overtime. But what Pierre-Luc Dubois said about tonight when the Jets were dominant in that first period was he's just kind of like finds it remarkable how calm their bench is in the face of things that aren't going well. And he said it was the same thing the other night. And he said he's had some really interesting conversations since he got there with Anze Kopitar about, and I mean, this comes to the leadership questions and the guys wearing the C. And he'd said it's like been an education already, just talking with Kopitar about his idea of like how you handle momentum. And his whole thing was like, you can't ride momentum. Like riding momentum is a bad thing. If you've won 3 straight games and you're getting high and you're riding momentum, it's a bad thing because you're kind of losing the moment. And that's, you see all these streaks teams go on. By the end of them, they're playing terrible, but they keep winning a couple of games. But then by the time that stops, they're playing terrible hockey. The idea that Anze Kopitar really impresses upon that team is like, just calmness at all times and focus on being in the moment. And I got the sense from that conversation that there was a feeling that maybe the Jets didn't have that the way that this LA Kings team. I think that Pierre-Luc Dubois sees it as a difference between the Jets and the LA Kings and the LA Kings and the Blue Jackets. Like, I do think that he thinks he's at a place where they're at the next level of handling the highs and lows. And I think that that's a big question that comes out of this game for me, Ken, is the idea. Like I said, I feel like this game was a little bit of a microcosm of last season. You start out hot. When everything's going, you're absolutely dominant. When things get interrupted, it's how you handle it. How do you handle things when you get punched in the mouth? And I just think this is another example of a Jets team getting punched in the mouth and just not handling it well. If the LA Kings were uber patient and calm when things weren't going well for them tonight, I don't think the Jets showed the same thing when the game turned.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the best players in the NHL for a reason for a long, long time. And I would say this. He is a great leader, and it's in some ways easier to be a great leader when you've been to the top of the mountain multiple times. It's easy to stay calm under pressure when you've seen your team win 16 games, all 16 games that are required to lift the trophy, right? So, but the beauty about Kopitar's leadership, Sean, he's been through a rebuild. and he's kept the same demeanor, right? He had the same demeanor when they were winning cups as he was when this team was losing games, and it was driving him nuts to be on a team that wasn't winning. But, you can only be a great leader in that regard by going through things like that. So, it's super early, and you don't want to draw ridiculous conclusions early, but the Jets they got punched in the mouth, and now we're going to find out how they respond. This is the first real test early in the year. And now let's find out if they're going to learn a few lessons. I mean, that's where things are at right now with this team. I don't think you overreact after a bad loss. Bad losses happen. It's an 82-game season, but this is important. So you need to show some pushback, and now's the first opportunity to do so. But yeah, I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois handled himself well in this game. Had a goal. Took the boos. They were there every time he touched the puck. He kind of knew it was coming. And, now they move on. I mean, I would say he did his part. Fans aired out their grievances for sure. And, that's the end of it for now. I think that he's probably going to get that treatment every time he comes. But,
yeah,
he'll
be the next PK Subban.
Right. I mean, but he took it, and then he scored a goal after. The Jets did a great job of killing the penalty, and then they couldn't get the puck out because they were tired, and Dubois feeds Kopitar. Kopitar shot in the pads. Dubois cleans up the garbage, going to the net, going to the hard area, and quieted the crowd at least for a quick portion. But I mean, we're not here to dig into that too much. I mean,
well, I wanted to have a quick say on it. Like, for one of the things I like doing, and I think people like doing on this podcast, that I had my Morrissey conversation that I brought into this. I like doing that because I think we have an interesting job, Ken, and like I've said this in the past, a guy like Ken, the stuff that he goes through to make sure that what he's saying right now in this moment, or on air, or on record in the paper, is like, I know that there's a feeling, because we live in this era where, there's hot takes and people get out and they say something on Twitter or whatever. And there you go. Well, like, there's restrictions that come with being a journalist, and certain things you have to do, and double and triple sourcing, and all these different kind of things you have to do to get to that point. So I like to give a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. And the peek behind the curtain today is Pierre-Luc Dubois handled this whole situation extremely, extremely well.
Yep.
Like, I look back on it was not a Hockey Night in Canada game, but it was a Sportsnet game when he made his return to Columbus, and I thought he didn't handle that as well. If you remember that night, Ken, he didn't have a very good game. He didn't play well. He seemed to be perturbed by the boos that were raining down on him, and the Jets ended up losing that game, and it wasn't a very good performance. Now, here he comes in here tonight, talks with us in the media. He knows all of us. He sees everybody's faces. I thought he handled it with, like, not just a smile on his face, but it was almost like he was enjoying it. It was like he's going to go in and he's not going to play the bad guy in the way that he's going to, like, really try and torque up the crowd.
Right.
But I don't think he minded the idea that he was going to be the bad guy tonight. And I think he handled it well and talked about, like, gave honor to the city. He said afterwards he got a care package from DeLucas while he was here, had that ordered up, saw his parents, all, visited with people. But I think Pierre-Luc Dubois wanted this really bad, but handled it, didn't say anything disparaging about the city. So handled his media stuff well, got the goal in the game tonight. I thought tonight he didn't get into, like, Pierre-Luc Dubois rat mode, which I think that was on purpose, right?
Yep.
And I think part of that too had to do with, like, maybe a maturing Ken, that when the game turned in their favor, if he'd gone out and done that, that's just a way to bring the Jets back into the game. So I think he saw that the Jets had kind of fallen asleep, and rather than kind of poke them and make fun of them the way we've seen him do in the past, where he gets people around up, he kind of tucked them in and said, just keep sleeping and just ride this one out. And then afterwards, the comments that he had, and I think the stuff that he's learning and the insights that he shared, I think, for all the people who liked Pierre-Luc Dubois when he was here, it was on display. A lot of things that you would have liked about him, like LA, I think will be very happy with that player and getting them. I think it's going to be a debate for a long time. Again, the Jets got a lot of really good pieces. I think the people who are in the team that gets the best player wins the trade mode are going to be saying that a lot when they're down in LA kind of thing. But I thought it should be noted and pointed out. Pierre-Luc Dubois handled this with aplomb and really did. I'm not saying it's the end of this. And I think to your point, Ken, fans are going to boo him for years. And so I think there's going to be opportunities for the Jets to stick it to him in the future, but he decisively in every way, I thought, won round one of this thing afterwards. Ken,
just a quick one too. And I had a chance to talk to Pierre-Luc before the scrum too. When I went into the room, he was getting ready to do the interview, and we had a good talk. I mean, he's a guy who I understand that people want to voice their displeasure and everything else, and they're entitled. But what they should also know is that he's a classy individual. He treated us with nothing but respect. He was genuinely happy to say hello this morning. And two things can be true. And I get it. Some people are saying, it's just lip service. But why assume that it's just lip service? Two things can be true. He can enjoy himself when he was in Winnipeg, but also look for a different opportunity for him in Los Angeles. So, again, it's up to him. He's made his choice. I appreciated the responses he gave, and I thought he handled himself with class. He had nothing but good things to say about Winnipeg. And, now we turn the page and move on to the next chapter. But I agree with you. He played hard in the game. He didn't, wasn't as physical, but that's because the game didn't require him to be physical. But now that I've mentioned physical, let's get into the hit quickly.
Okay, before we do, I want your lamplighter of the game. Give me a lampy, Ken. Give me a lampy.
Oh, this is too easy for me, and I know that the people, the people in the crowd aren't going to like it, but it's the Dubois goal, because the Jets had been in, basically had been mostly in control of the first period. They didn't have it going in the second. They got what should have been a great penalty kill, but they couldn't get the puck out of the zone, and it ends up in the back of the net. And although it didn't end up being the game winner because Mark Scheifele scored the late garbage time goal, as you said, it was the game that shifted the tide fully. And the Kings they put the Vegas Python grip on the Jets, and they couldn't recover. I mean, the goal would have been Morrissey's, but his clapper went bar down. I still don't know how that went bar down and didn't go over the goal line, but it didn't. And in such, the Jets chased the game the rest of the game and just never got it going.
I think you're. I think that's a good one. I mean, I'll say, to me, the reverse lamplighter. If we've ever done something like that before, we haven't. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to invent it here tonight on a night where it's hard to find something, because I do think that Hellebuyck didn't have the best night. So I don't think that there was a ton of pretty goals. Like the Moore goal that goes through him, I don't think that it's necessarily the best goal. The Pierre-Luc Dubois goal, him chipping it into an open net, it's just it's not pretty. Fortuitous bounce kind of thing. The long distance goal is a goal that shouldn't have happened. The fifth goal I thought was a little bit weak as well. I just didn't think, even Scheifele's goal is like, you can tell Cam Talbot, he's 2 minutes away from a shutout, and he lets out a rebound.
Juicy rebound.
He should not have been giving out that rebound. You could tell by his reaction how upset he was with himself. So it was one of those. So I'll do the reverse, just in the idea that, and we'll dive into it after this because we got to get to the keg save of the game as well. But the Peretti turnover behind the net that just gets moved out front and then ends up in the back of the net. That, to me, that was the backbreaker. Like, that basically snuffed out any idea that the Jets were going to come back in that game, I thought. So I give that the reverse lamplighter, because that's just one of those, I think, like we'd said about it on the last show, and we'll dig into it a little bit deeper, but you're going to have to live with the nice things that Peretti does. Like, if you think of last game, him getting the puck to Dylan DeMello, that really, really nice pass sets him up with all kinds of time. You're going to get that from Cole Peretti, and you're also going to get him as a second line center doing something like he did tonight with that giveaway, which I thought was fairly egregious. And so that's the reverse lamplighter for me. I don't know. Do what you want. Make up your own rules. But what thing you have to do is share with us your lamplighter of the game, however you want to share it. Because if you do, you are automatically entered to win
Hashtag it, though.
Hashtag it. An 8-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale brought to you by our friends at TransCanada Brewing Company, the nectar of the gods. And Ken's got a good idea here. Like I said, I've been cruising through the shows. It would be easier to find these things. So we're going to give a little bit of leniency, but I think by about 10, show 10 that we get going here, we want to have Lamplighter hashtagged so that we can easily find it in the comments. And we want to have the keg, you could say save of the game afterwards, but the keg hashtagged as well. So we can more easily make sure we're finding all these comments and make sure that if you are entering this, it's easier for us to identify that you've been entered. So share with us your hashtag Lamplighter of the game. And you too could be going home with a frosty, delicious 8-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale, brought to you by our friends at TransCanada Brewing Company. And that means it's time for me to announce the winner of the last Lamplighter. And guess what? Show 1. Winner was from out of town, so they said to throw it back into the pot. So today's winner is winning a 16-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale, frosty and delicious, and that would be Lauren Findlay. Lauren Findlay, you know what to do. You're on the clock. Get a hold of me. Let me know your full name, which I already know is Lauren Findlay, and your email address. And I have that as well because Lauren's been to a bunch of the shows. I think he may have been to all 5 last season, Ken. So anyways, very deserving.
Gold star for attendance. Gold star for attendance.
There you go.
You go. Gold star.
Good on him. 16-pack for Lauren Findlay. Congratulations. And then that means we're moving on to the keg save of the game. Ken, do you have one?
It's a toughie. I think that there was a Cam Talbot save on a one-timer from the slot for Cole Peretti. It was when Nikolaj Ehlers drove down the left side, left a pass into the slot, and Peretti got some good wood on it, as we used to say before the sticks went to the aluminum variety. It kind of caught Talbot up top, and it looked like it kind of bounced in the air, but he made the save on it. So, I think that's, to me, is going to be the save of the game. That happened in the first period where the Jets really kind of felt they should have came out with the lead, and they were never really able to recover. So.
Well, here, I'll tell you something. I agree with you on that. The keg, the first keg save of the game award has been handed out. Again, it was someone from out of town, but they wanted to pass it off to a friend, which they have the right to do. Like I said, the winner of the first Lamplighter wanted it thrown back into the mix, into the pot. So that's why we're doing it like this. So anyways, tonight's winner of the keg save of the game, or excuse me, from last show, would be Scott Westman. Ken, another guy who I know that he didn't run the table, but I think that he was at 2, if not 3 of the live shows, and he was at the final show. So, hey, listen, K and R is KAR, which is the building blocks of the word karma. And these two gentlemen, Lauren Findlay and Scott Westman, have all kinds of K&R karma going on right now because they have been massive supporters of the podcast. They've been massive supporters of our live shows, massive supporters of the year ender. So, hey, listen, if you want the good karma that folks like Lauren Findlay and Scott Westman have on this show right now, you should probably be digging in and coming and checking out and seeing us live. Why not? It's a great time. We will be announcing, after we lock our dates fully down, we are going to be announcing the dates of our 4 live shows. We will be doing the big year ender at the end of the year. We can't hammer down a date for that. We know how that goes. But that's what we're going to do, Ken. We're going to announce all 4 live shows. And then basically at that point, tickets are up for sale for all of them. All at the same time. So it's going to be a free-for-all. First come, first serve kind of thing. We'll get to that next week. But anyways, keg save of the game. We're so happy to have them on board. And boy, oh boy, what a gift that is to the people in the live audience. Because I'll tell you this, if I'm heading down to the keg and I'm using $50 to go down there and get myself one of those juicy steaks, what's it called? Is it Oh, Ken, the one that comes with like crab on top of it.
You got to
What do
get
you
the
call that
Oscar
one? Steak
topping, buddy.
Oscar.
You got to get the Oscar. Yeah.
Steak Oscar. There you go. I'm salivating just thinking about it. Scott, listen, if you want to take Renny down to the keg and get him some steak Oscar, feel free to. But you should probably take your wife. I know the kids are out of the household now, so if you want to take the wife, that's probably the kind of thing. Like I said, this is where I need to go to get out of the doghouse. Maybe you should do the same thing, because Scott's the kind of guy who ends up in the doghouse quite often. Anyway,
Visit
moving
one
on.
of the 3 Winnipeg locations.
There you go. I wanted to go back up quickly. We just talked about Peretti. It's one of the things that I thought is actually kind of making it tough to see what's going on with the second line, because Ehlers is, like we'd said, he was injured, so he's not up to full speed. So there's a little bit of an issue there. So Ehlers could really use kind of someone on that line dragging his play up, right? And then you've got Cole Peretti, who's trying to establish himself in the second line. And Cole could really use someone to kind of drag him up offensively. The kind of guy, like if Ehlers was up at full speed, flying around and kind of drawing the attention that he does, that would create a lot of ice for Cole Peretti. And I think it's a little bit of a tricky situation, because Cole Peretti is trying to figure it out as he goes. A real tough spot in the NHL, trying to be a second line center on a contending team. Nick Ehlers is trying to get back up to speed and doesn't have a established centerman right now to kind of guide him through and cover off where he's missing. And I think it's made it really tough, because I take a look on the other wing and I see Nino Niederreiter is doing all the things that Nino Niederreiter typically does, and is very effective at. He's around the net. He's getting a lot of chances. He's not quite finishing. But I just see a little bit of a disconnect on that line, Ken, and that we are not seeing Nick Ehlers be Nick Ehlers. And I think we're seeing, a little bit of Nino Niederreiter on an island doing all the right things, but it's not necessarily paying off. And Cole Peretti just trying to figure things out and making the mistakes that a young centerman is going to make.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the reasons. I mean, I understand earlier on I said Nemesnikov, I like him on that line, moving up to the top line. The more I've thought about it over the course of the hour on the show, I think go Ehlers with that line for now. I think with the way that Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor have come out of the gate, I think maybe they can help get Nikolaj Ehlers going. And we know, as I mentioned earlier, Nemesnikov has some chemistry with Nino Niederreiter. He also gives Nemesnikov playing on a line with Peretti, gives him that insulation that we talked about, Sean, in terms of the defensive responsibilities. So that's what I would go right now. But again, I understand a lot of people are on Peretti. Like, let's not forget. Last game he showed his elite vision and found DeMello in the slot. That's 1 game ago, not 3 months ago. That's 1 game ago. He showed his elite vision. Today wasn't his best, but I'm not ready to abandon the Cole Peretti experiment. If the Jets do ever get to that point where they're thinking about moving him to the wing, I actually would like to see Peretti play with Mark Scheifele. There definitely was a "I've got your back" Cole. Not just when Dylan Sandberg dropped the gloves after the hit, but Mark Scheifele going into the scrum after the play as well. And this is not an excuse for why the Jets lost, but absolutely hated the hit, Sean. I don't think that Peretti did not turn. That's a push on the numbers, and it's a dangerous play where his face gets smushed into the glass. I don't have any idea how 4 men wearing stripes can look at that play and give Dylan Sandberg 17 minutes and not call boarding. And even if you're not going to call boarding, there is no need to call an instigator penalty. It was a willing combatant. So anyways, ridiculous that the boarding was missed, and even more ridiculous that Dylan Sandberg had to spend more than 17 minutes in the box in a fight where I understand people are getting all upset because took a couple big shots in the visor. Well, here's the other part. Sandberg couldn't really swing because the stick of the Kings player was stuck in the middle. So anyways, I hated the hit. I loved Cole's response. He was very calm after. It was clear that he didn't like the hit. I thought I had established my numbers. It is what it is. Ref thought it was a clean play. I'm going to take his word for it. Definitely didn't feel good. All those ones where you think you could have put yourself in a better position, I thought I had established my numbers to him, had my back to him, and he finishes through a couple feet away from the boards. Like, that's one of the more dangerous plays in hockey. Sean, I've said this before. I wish the league was sterner on hits from behind. A player shouldn't have to be carried out on a stretcher for there to be a call on hits from behind. I hate hits from behind. They're the worst hits in hockey, and they need to be handled a little better.
No doubt. I will say this, that coming out of that entire situation, some of the stuff that happened, I know that it probably cost you in this game. And I go back to that game, the Logan Stanley holding up the helmet in the air game where the Jets went after, and Pierre-Luc Dubois went after Austin Matthews. And I thought that the Toronto Maple Leafs lost their cool in that game. I know that I'm going back a while for this, but I think most Jets fans are going to remember this. So I think that there's value in a game to like holding your cool, but I also think that there's certain times that it's like you kind of got to show up and fight. And I don't take a look at this game and think that the Jets lost and fell out of this game because they got involved in the extracurriculars. I don't think that they helped, no doubt. But I like the response that I see from the Jets in that situation. I like that Cole Perfetti, when he gets out of the box at that point, goes straight after a Kings player just to try and say, just to try and say, okay, we're getting at this. I love Mark Scheifele engaged now. It's like, boy, oh boy, like how many games has he played? 2 preseason games, now 3 games. So 5 hockey contests he's played so far this year, and he's gotten a fight in 2 of them. And in this one, he grabs and ragdolls a guy who in the past had a history with the Winnipeg Jets, and cross-check to Josh Morrissey in a game that they played last year, if I remember correctly. So I'm all for what I'm seeing from Mark Scheifele right now. In the first period, they were a dominant line. And I don't think that they, as the Jets tailed off, I don't think they were, hugely problematic or anything like that. Him getting a goal and being on a goal per game pace, 3 games, 3 goals right now. I'd said, I think Mark Scheifele is the most engaged that I've seen him for quite some time, maybe since 2018. I think he's doing the things that a leader does. I think these are the kind of things that if you're Cole Perfetti and you see your assistant and probably, maybe best player out there doing what he did in that situation to kind of bounce back after what has happened to you. I think that's team building, right? I think if you're Cole Perfetti, you take a look at that and you think that Mark Scheifele is doing that. That means he's got my back. It makes you want to play. It makes you want to play through things. And I think, I think we see that bounce back from him because of the Mark Scheifele thing. Knowing that a guy like that is going to have your back in that situation. So I liked what I saw out of that. I think it bodes well for the Winnipeg Jets going forward. Not everything like that has to pay off specifically in that game. Those things can pay out throughout the season, and I think that helps. I do think there was a little bit of like Dylan Samberg would be one of the tougher guys on the Winnipeg Jets, but boy, oh boy, did he eat a couple. The one thing he came back into that game, but I don't know about you, Ken, but like he never looked wobbled, but he didn't look clear to me when he was going to the penalty box. Those were two hard punches that he ate in that situation there. And I think it's one of those things. I've always said this before, Ken. I think I've given you my theory on this, but I go back to when the Calgary Flames lost the cup to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think what ended up killing them was throughout those playoffs, it was always, God, why is he escaping their best player at that time? Yeah, Jerome, I don't know why that. Jerome McGinley would always get in fights and he would tune the other guy up, and he was doing it all playoffs, and it just fueled the Flames. And I remembered saying it's a dangerous game to play because if he goes out and he doesn't win a fight, it could have the opposite effect. And I really do think that's one of the ways. If you remember, Vinny LeCavalier fought Jerome McGinley, and he didn't fight him to a draw. He beat him. it wasn't, he didn't trounce him, but he beat him. And I think that turned the tide. And I kind of felt that was a little bit of it tonight. Dylan Sandberg's a tough guy. And I think in a situation like that, people thought, okay, here we go. And he ate two really hard shots. I don't think I've been talking about Dylan Sandberg. I talked to him before the game. I think he's been playing really, really great hockey. I'm not saying he took a step back, but I did see him on his toes the way I saw him before that. I think that situation affected the game quite a bit just because that player, bullies and takes a hit that's probably, it's a bad hit, and then kind of gets away with it the way that he does by maybe bullying another Jets player. I think that was one of those situations where, if you're wanting more toughness on your team, that's a time that you could have used it.
Yeah, I mean, you've been in a lot more fights than I have, Sean, but I thought the reason he was bleeding was because he clipped his visor. So I think there was definitely one of the two was a clean shot.
But I thought those two shots.
I thought the second one was on the visor. I think the first one was on the chin or on the cheek, but I thought the second one was on his visor. But I mean, I'm not saying he didn't hit him hard. He obviously did. But I thought the blood, it looked worse than it was because of the visor cutting him. At the same time, I honestly think that he definitely lost the fight. But I think that he was waiting for the ref to clear the stick.
I think so too.
The stick was caught in between where he would be throwing punches. He was waiting for the ref to hit the stick, and by the time he waited, he got the first one in the face, and then it was too late.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
And tell me if I'm wrong. I don't blame Englund for swinging, but in a fight like that, you're kind of supposed to wait. I mean, until
you're supposed to square off.
And that stick's supposed to get out of there.
Agreed.
So all these people going crazy,
100%.
oh, Dylan got killed. Well, Dylan is a college player, but he's not afraid to fight, and he is a tough guy. So because he took one shot because he wasn't ready to swing, it wasn't that he was not ready to fight. He was waiting. He did the right thing, waiting for the stick to be cleared. Anyways, regardless. Good for him standing up for his teammate.
No, for sure. For sure. There you go. And Phyllis says it right here. Absolutely love to see the response from Sandberg and Scheifele. I know a lot of people don't like fighting in the game. I understand that take. And I understand and respect all the stuff about CTE and all those kind of things. Hey, I have concerns myself about CTE and the effects of eating a lot of punches has done to me and some of my takes on this very podcast here.
Impacted by CTE. Only the bad
there we go. There
only
you go.
Only the bad ones. Only the bad ones.
Yes, if it's a bad take from Renny, it's the CTE speaking. Okay, everybody, there we go. I've got my out. That's it for us here tonight. Thank you, everybody. Again, rocking the chat room here. I know we're getting close to 12 o'clock, and there's so many people still here. It means the world to us, the support that you give us. Speaking of the support you give us, the support that we get from our sponsors. If you appreciate the conversations happening in this space, please appreciate our sponsors who fight daily to make that happen and keep these conversations in this space for us. That's Vittorio Rossi, Pristine Roofing, Cambrian Credit Union, TransCanada Brewing Company, the Keg, and of course the Kenny and Renny OGs, the Johnston Group. Thanks to all of them. It's so great to have you all on board, and it was so great to have all of you on board here tonight. I'm getting really excited to announce the live events, Ken, because those were some of my favorite times that I had last season. It was great to meet with people. We want to do that again, so start thinking of coming on down, everybody, because we love meeting people live. It just helps us to put names to faces and see really that person, that sweet looking person there has those kind of takes on our show. How's that even happen? It's good to see it. It pulls back the curtain and you get to see Oz working away behind the curtain. It's good stuff. Thank you, everybody. Ken, great job here tonight. We will see everybody after the next big game the Jets will be playing Thursday when they welcome the reigning Stanley Cup champions in the Vegas Golden Knights. We will see you after that, everybody. Bye-bye.